Now that I'm connected to my MongoDB instance, I'm going to run some commands to install MongoDB. So the first command I'm going to run is just to install the dependencies I need to install MongoDB. So yes, installing needs dependencies to install. After that, I have to add the MongoDB keys to my machine. This just makes my machine trust the MongoDB repository where the MongoDB application server is installed. So I'm going to install this, and you can see my key has been installed onto my key ring. After that, I am going to specify the MongoDB repo URL. So because we are using a Debian machine, Debian stores all of the links to all repos inside the sources list directory. Now, what I'm doing is I am adding the MongoDB repository into the sources list directory as its own repository file. After I have added the repository into the list, I am now going to update the system, and I'm going to make sure that all of my packages are also up to date. So this first command updates the links to all of my packages and make sure it sees the links to all of my packages. And this next command will upgrade all of the packages themselves. So since this is a newly created virtual machine, there aren't many packages that need to be updated. So now that my server updates are done, it took a while, it took around 15 minutes to actually finish running. I'm now going to install the MongoDB Enterprise server onto my machine. So here I'm installing the MongoDB Server Enterprise Edition. And it shouldn't take too long this time. It should just take a few seconds or a few minutes to install this MongoDB Enterprise Edition. Now you can actually see here, it's not installing just one package. It's installing many different packages. This includes the MongoDB shell, the MongoDB server, and other MongoDB Enterprise tools. Now, after we've installed MongoDB, you can clear your screen by typing Control-L or by also typing the word clear. If you type the word clear, that also clears your screen. Now, this next part is optional but very important. This command or these sets of commands are meant for you to lock the current version of MongoDB that's installed. You don't want MongoDB to suddenly upgrade in the middle of your learning of MongoDB and suddenly change everything. So we are going to lock the MongoDB server versions to whatever versions are installed at this moment. And again, that's what this command does. And you can see now it is successfully set to those particular versions. Now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to edit our MongoDB config file. You can actually start using MongoDB right now, but I do recommend that you edit your config file for future reference. So you see I changed outfits again because I had to redo this part. So the MongoDB config file is inside the etc or the etc directory, and we will need sudo access to access that directory. So if you type sudo vim the etc directory and then the MongoDB config file, you can start editing this MongoDB config file. Now you can see currently the MongoDB service is set to bind to IP 127.0.0.1. This IP address is actually the localhost IP address. This means that MongoDB is only listening to the MongoDB on the local machine. it is not exposed outside the local machine. And we want it exposed outside the local machine so that other machines can connect to this MongoDB server. A database should be connected to by applications. And that's why we have to change this bind IP. So we're going to change this bind IP to listen on all interfaces instead. So you can see I can paste that bind IP all will be true. This means that it will listen on all interfaces on this machine. Now, an interface, think of it as an IP address. So on all IP addresses on this machine. So I am now going to save and exit this. And I can start my MongoDB instance or MongoDB service. So I'm going to run systemctl start and the MongoDB service. Now we can check if the MongoDB service is running. And you can see that the MongoDB service is running successfully. Now we are going to make sure that this MongoDB service runs on startup. So that if you stop this machine and then start this machine, the MongoDB service is going to be running alongside this machine. So we're essentially adding this to the auto start. Now we're going to run the systemctl enable command, and now MongoDB is going to run even if this machine reboots. Finally, we can check if MongoDB is running on all interfaces or is listening on all interfaces by typing ssant, ss-ant. Right? This means we are looking at our sockets. That's what the SS stand for. We are looking at TCP ports, and we are looking at all sockets on this machine and not translating domain names into IP addresses. That's ANT. So A means everything, all, N means do not translate IP addresses, and T means only TCP. So you can see here that MongoDB is running on all interfaces on port 27017. We can test this even further by running Mongo shell, right? The Mongo shell command. And you can see that I can open the MongoDB server. Now, we can also check if it's running on all interfaces by actually specifying our IP address. So if we say that we are going to connect to MongoDB on our IP address, this should still work. By default, it's actually connecting to MongoDB on localhost, as you can see here. But even if I specify that we are going to connect to MongoDB on our IP address and not on localhost, you can see that that still works. So this will be important in the future when you'll create clusters of MongoDB servers that need to talk to one another. Now, just to check if our MongoDB server is actually working, let's try and add a document to a database. So we are going to use a database called sample, and we are going to use the insert command. So I'm going to create a collection called movies, and I'm going to insert one document into the movies collection. So I am going to give this document a title. The title of this document will be, let's say, Five Nights at Freddy's. And you can see that the movies collection actually had a new document added to it. Now we can also add another document just for completion, and let's call this I don't know what movie was out recently. Let's say The Little Mermaid live action. I suppose the Barbie movie came out first at this time, but that's the only thing I remembered. So, Little Mermaid live action, it's been inserted. So, I'm also going to add the Barbie movie because I also just remembered that the Barbie movie was just released. Now, if we do a find on this movie collection, you can actually see that this movie collection has 3 documents: Five Nights at Freddy's, Little Mermaid, and Barbie. In the next couple of videos, you will actually see how you can run more commands on MongoDB, but at least at this point, you know that it's actually running.